grazie. Ragazzi, allora volevo dare un ulteriore suggerimento su come fare la presentazione degli Stati Uniti, perché ho visto che molti di voi si sono limitati alla parte geografica, diciamo, che è pure importante, però ce ne sono delle altre che vanno poi anche a toccare aspetti sociali di questo territorio. This is what I should say. If I should introduce the United States, of course, I can't avoid speaking about the enormous vastity of this territory that extends from one coast, the Atlantic coast, to the west coast, the Pacific coast, on the Pacific Ocean, and the vastity of this territory that you need more or less 4 hours or 5 hours from the east coast to the west coast if you want to reach the other coast. Uh, but there is another aspect that is fundamental in this country, this very peculiar country. First of all, it is a baby nation. It has a very recent history if compared to that of the European continent. But it is a very peculiar history because it is a land of immigrants. Of course, when Columbus discovered this land, the land was already inhabited by a group of Indian Americans that were living in peace. But the new continent, the new world gave new possibilities to the European explorers. So they arrived in during the 16th up to the 17th century, waves of explorers from Spain, from Portugal, from France, and Great Britain arrived to the east coast of the American continent. And they firstly they did only business with local people. Their main interest was trade, but little by little they tried to found some settlement, and the first colony, British colony, was Virginia, in honor to the Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. And from that moment, we have the first British settlement in the future USA. Then we have another important historical episode, that is that the arrival of the Pilgrim Fathers that arrived from Plymouth in the south of Great Britain to escape from religious persecution. And they were searching freedom of religion. Why are they important? Because in some way they are the Puritan heart of the United States. Yes, the Puritan heart, because in some way the colonists that arrived here and settled there, they kept inside the original spirit of their their home country. Um, why I said Puritan heart? Because in some way, up today, the Americans have a conservative heart, and they are very moralist. And why the historical fact of the Pilgrim Fathers is always remembered, uh, because they founded um, an agricultural settlement, and they have preserved the original spirits up today. In fact, many of the Amish communities that still exist nowadays, the ancestors are the Pilgrims' Father, the Puritans. Uh, in, you have to remember that the Amish is an agricultural community that up today they live refusing to use modernity such as electricity or cars or what else. Um, they are nowadays they are some a touristic attraction in some way, but they do believe in they refuse of modernity. Another aspect. This is an aspect of the history that is that has remained in the present situation and history of USA. Then another aspect is the proud of the colonists to become independent from the United Kingdom. And in on July the 4th, 1776, the 13 colonies, British colonies, that were engaged in trades with Great Britain refused to pay habitat taxation, and they rebelled against the United Kingdom army. It was an act of protest that is still remembered as the Boston Tea Party. So the colony threw away all the boxes with tea that were to be exported to the United Kingdom, and they throw it into the sea, into the port of Boston, and the sea transformed itself into brown color like tea. And that was the starting point of the Independence War. That the American colonists won, and the British government had to recognize the independence. So the original 13 colonies, they 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 wrote the founding fathers. They are called so founding fathers, padri fondatori. They wrote a constitution that is remembered as the Declaration of Independence. That is a document that in some way has inspired also the Declaration of Rights of Men and Citizens that is on the basis of the French Revolution. The period was that because after 10 years, there was 10 years more or less, there was the French Revolution. We were in times of the age of reason. In the age of reason, we are talking of we are talking about the 18th century. The 18th century, the Illuminism is called in another way, age of reason in English. Um, but from the 13 colonies, of course, they are in located in this part, and in the part that now is remembered and is called in the region is called New England, and they preserved their characteristics of their cultures. But this is the original heart of the Anglophones world, the British world. They preserved their customs, they preserved the language, and they also preserved um, the the moral uses. But this is not so important today, because we know that today, even if English is the national language, the second in the United States, more or less all languages are spoken, because little by little, in many waves of immigrants that arrived from the old continent, this land was little by little conquered by the pioneers, by uh, mm, the immigrants. Who were the immigrants? They were people looking for a better life, poor people that had nothing to lose, that had nothing in their own country. They were uh, political persecuted. They were criminals that were um, running away their nation. They were French, they were Italians, they were Spanish, they were uh, German. So they were arriving here. They were Irish. Many of them were Irish, and they were arriving here, especially in the port of New York City, and they they put in inland. They pushed inland to conquer new territory. And there was another period of the history that is remembered as the conquest of the West, because all these pioneers that were essentially agriculture, they wanted the land, because for them the land was the only thing that was necessary to survive. They wanted the land, so they conquered the, the new territory, and they had to struggle against the Indians, the American Indians, that in some way were almost destroyed by the pioneers and by the American army, the USA Army. They were also encouraged because somebody has told them that in the northwest there was the gold, and they were eager to find gold to become rich. So that in some way in this period there are the roots of the so-called American dream. The American dream is something that is really a dream, the dream to become rich. And all the Americans that arrived here and they landed in the port, in one port on the east coast, the Atlantic coast, they wanted to have a new opportunity in life. Some of them succeeded in become rich, and now they are some of the most powerful and rich families in the USA. But many of them became rejected of society, and they didn't succeed and survive. There is another moment in the history that is called the Civil War. There was a moment in the 70s, in the 70s, yes, not in the 70s, in the 19th, early 19th century, that there was a struggle between a difference, not a struggle, there was a difference of opinion about economy between the North, that was more industrialized and with many industrial towns, and the South, that was mainly an agricultural region, and that survived essentially thanks to the slaves. that had been imported from Africa to work the cotton fields, the tobacco fields in the south. So, uh, why the Civil War? Because the South didn't want to accept the law by Abraham Lincoln to abolish the slavery, while the North claimed better democracy and give liberty to the slaves. So they fought one against the other, and the North won. The North won. It seemed that slavery was abolished, but we have to wait at least another a century and a half to face again this problem that was the black situation and the black rewards. We have to arrive to the 60s. So the 60s, another important period in the history of the United States. The 50s and the 60s. The 50s, after the Second World War, saw this nation as a very industrialized and powerful nation, a welfare nation with benefits for everybody, while other waves of immigrants keep on arriving both from the old continent and also from the east, arriving to the Pacific coast. I'm speaking of the Chinese that were escaping from poverty of their country, and at a certain moment, up to a certain moment, the government of USA accepted all these waves of immigrants because there was an enormous territory to build. They had to build railways, they had to build roads, they had to build cities, skyscrapers, palaces, and everything where need hands to work. So they accepted. But at a certain moment, the affluent society stopped this wave of immigrants because they brought many problems. They brought many problems, and at a certain moment, the USA government decided to uh, um, to keep under control the immigration. The first station, Frontier, was 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 built on a small island in front of the port of New York City. It is Ellis Island. Ellis Island was the borderline and the frontier for all those who were arriving from Europe, from the European continent. They had to stop there, pass certain exams, tests, and then only if they had someone that was calling them and that was still living in USA, they could pass. So this was the first form of immigrants control that the Americans put into motion. And then we have the 60s. So this happened. This kind of control of immigrants started during the 40, no, the 30s and the 40s and also the 50s. In the 60s, during the 60s, there was another important moment in the American history. That is the movement against the Vietnam War, and uh, and the movement of civil rights, um, the civil rights of black people and the all the immigrants, okay? Uh, because welcoming all these different waves of immigrants from all countries in Europe and also these enormous, numerous population of African Americans has had put lots of problems. And as United States of America has always been seen as the land of liberty, democracy, and freedom, many of the struggles for the civil rights started here. And we should not but remember that of the Black Panthers, that of Martin Luther King, and also a Democratic president such as John Kennedy, that in some way wanted to solve all these conflicts. You should always remember that the United States of America, from the historical point of view, is a baby nation, and it's a nation that has reinvented everything and has always been seen as the land where you could restart everything. But that is not true. Not true. It is a contradiction because in the heart of this nation they remain colonists, they remain Puritans, they remain moralists, and they remain agricultures, and they remain all pioneers. So, a land with a mixture of races, languages, and also religions, in which countries you have a total freedom of religion. Yes, the American dream still alive, and some people that today have become famous, they are witness of these possibilities. I'm speaking of Steve Jobs. I'm speaking of um, the inventor window system and Facebook. They were nothing. They were unknown, and now they are bi- billionaire, not millionaire, billionaire. So it's a very difficult land to introduce, and only if you, in some way, you cross all the history and the stratification of this history, you can realize what they are. But you can't grasp the whole. You can't grasp the whole.